Can I come in and bring in your geopolitics side of your work and tie this with the China question? Because I was struck by your comment by this Chinese interlocutor that you were referring to in your meeting, saying that there's a sword dangling over the head of the Chinese leadership, and how this plays back in the United States, because we've seen within the Biden-Harris administration in its first several months really two schools of thought about China. One is that China, as you said, is the linchpin. There's so much that we could be doing with China in terms of shifting the world towards clean energy, climate resilience, and the like. But then there's another group that has a high degree of continuity, intellectually at least, with some elements from its predecessor administration, which says, great, China has these existential threats, so let's use this to pressure them, right? That this is a climate and energy or vulnerabilities to kind of pressure Beijing, and let's great power competition. Let's use climate and energy as tools in great power competition. Where do you think this may end up? How do you think this is going to get resolved? Really, if you kind of have John Kerry on one end and the Asia Pacific hands that seem to be populating, particularly the National Security Council and to a lesser extent the Defense Department. How do you think this may work itself out? Because I think, as Tatiana has said, when we've seen this with regard to really with Russia policy, that this cooperate where we can, compete where we must, never seems to lead to really effective policy. It's a good bumper sticker, and then it doesn't seem to deliver. So I myself am skeptical of that phrase, because having seen it in use with Russia for the last 15 years, with not perhaps a lot of effectiveness, I kind of doubt that it's really a guide for engaging or competing with China in the 2020s. But I'd be interested in your thoughts, tying together your climate and energy side with your geopolitics hat. Where do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, no, and again, I think it's really complicated, right? I mean, not to sort of simplify everything down, it's really complex and complicated. But I think in this regard it is, because it's a bit of a tightrope, right, that the United States walks here, right? Because this is kind of going in my piece, right? When I'm talking about climate statecraft, it's like great power competition between the United States and China, and climate and addressing climate change in terms of each are sort of racing to to achieve these targets that they've set, and how they're going to do that, and how they could also use it to build their allies and alliances, and also potentially be technologically competitive, because there is some decoupling that's that we've seen happening between the two countries. But and I think that Kerry has said, and China has also put in place a climate envoy, Xi Zhenhua, forgive my pronunciation, who was also the climate envoy that Kerry worked with for the agreement that was made in 2014 that went into 2015, and he's sort of recognized as a really esteemed, very astute negotiator. So I think there's an opportunity, right, with climate for Kerry to go in and to find some points and to say, the US and China are going to cooperate here. But I think there's also that other side that, hey, but wait a second, are we putting climate in its own sort of box and discounting the human rights violations and discounting the some of the spying and the stealing and all this kind of stuff. Like, so I think, how do you get that sort of balance that the two countries can kind of be working together, right? Or be seen as kind of being more cooperative, but at the same time, I think many in the Biden administration also want to make sure that they retain a firm stance towards China. And so if you're China, you might be a little apprehensive to trust the United States, right? Because we've already seen, I think, again, out of the gate, the Biden administration did a lot, right? They've only been, in office for a very short period of time, but I think they've set they've set agendas, right? They're very much out of the gate setting the climate agenda, with a whole slew of cabinet positions, and just the way that it's being threaded throughout many of the departments and agencies. And I think for China, China may take up, hey, we'll cooperate if it suits us, right? But we're also, I mean, I don't think there's no great love between, China and the United States. And so I think they would go into any kind of cooperative agreement that, maybe gets set in April during the Global Climate Summit. But I think it's going to be a pretty fragile cooperation, because I think both sides are going to be pretty cautious. And I don't think, I think Kerry said something, and again, I don't want to misquote, but the kind of that, he wouldn't discount the, human rights,
Yeah.
but that, climate can be its own sort of issue. But I think then people in the human rights community and many others are saying, but wait a second, you can't disassociate, right? So I think it is hard. I do think that the one, and I think last week, right, Ali, who was your guest, he said something that was really like the regenerative capacity of the United States. Sort of like, I remember I was walking my dog when I was listening, and I was like, oh, yes. And I think this is what we're seeing in the climate space, is this idea that the United States is regenerating, it's coming back into its power as a leader. And so there are some, I think, really important opportunities here for the United States to build back better, right? Build back better is a term we're hearing a lot, but build back better its relationships with allies, right? Being, Europe, the UK, Asia, right? Because I think, Trump did an awful job, right? With I think giving confidence to Asian allies that the United States would be there. And I think, that's something that the Biden administration is doing. So I think that great power competition in geopolitics is, I think we're going to see it also sort of play out in this climate space in an interesting way, where I do think it can be used as a potent form of foreign policy.